Hey, what's up, people? You are live on Shally's Alley. It is pretty close to the middle of the year, Friday, June 13th. Today, ooh, that's auspicious number,
Friday the
13.
13th.
Yeah, Friday the 13th. That's happened to me once before on the show.
Mm.
When I'm like, and I'm saying the date. I'm like, it's Friday the 13th. I'm like, ooh, wait a minute. That doesn't happen very often, but it has happened. It's kind of. I'm expecting Freddy Krueger to come up over my right shoulder here. But anyways, well, welcome to Shally's Alley. Thanks for joining us, folks. Our guest today is Nicole Roberts, and you might be familiar with her from her Amplify Your Signal show, which I guess we'll have to tell our listeners what that is. Yeah, a little plug for the show. But Nicole is her background. I shouldn't say but. Nicole's background is in talent acquisition and in HR, working with executives and founders. And now she leads a strategy strategy consulting practice, working with founders and CHRO partners, helping build people first cultures and things like that. So welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on here. You were
Thanks so
recommended by
much.
quite a few people. Lots of
Thanks so
people
much.
pointing to you. Yeah. Welcome. I wanted to start with something a little bit. I shouldn't say controversial because it's not really controversial, but let me start with this. You have companies that have seed money. They have
Mhm,
investors. They have,
mhm.
deep pockets that are the deep pockets run for 3 years or whatever, and then the money runs out. And if they're not profitable, they just get chopped up or sold or defunded or whatever. So that's one kind of investor, right?
Mhm.
Then you've got bootstrap companies or the angel investor companies where they're not going to run out. They're just going to keep bootstrapping and either they make it or they don't, but it's not like some VC is going to pull the money. And then you have PE,
Mhm.
which is a whole different animal.
Yes.
And in my experience, what I've personally have found is working in a leadership role
Mhm.
for a PE-backed company or a company that formerly was not and got acquired by private equity is um, really very different than any of the other types of funding, which all have their, there's the blank checkbook that you get from a highly funded company like an Uber or a Google, where you literally just have a blank checkbook for a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
Then there's the public corporation where there's all kinds of other types of scrutiny and everything. Then there's the founder backed and things like that. But with PE, there's a kind of unspoken, super KPI driven, almost like emotionless type of business. What's the very first thing you don't do when you're building TA or HR with a PE that's very different from any of the others? The very first thing that you don't do. What's the number one thing you want to avoid?
You want to avoid remembering that you are doing a culture build and not just an HR build, not just a systems build. You're creating clarity, trust, and alignment with people who have to live it every day. Like, it's one thing to have a fancy system or a fancy process that looks great on a deck for a board. It's another thing for the people that are living and breathing the system and living and breathing the process that has been put together. So you have to remember at the end of the day that people are actually going to be carrying this out.
And with PE is, I think that's kind of the what I was trying to say before, is with PE backed companies, it's really hard to remember that because they're coming at it from, it's a very different profitability equation.
Mhm.
It's not a, we've got 3 years to ramp up. It's not a, we're scrapping through and we're every penny counts. It's it's something completely different, and it kind of tends to be very depersonalized.
It
Um,
can be.
it's yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying is why is that so different? And yeah, that's my question. What's the advice for in a people business
Yeah.
trying to peopleify, if that's even a word.
Yeah. So it can be until you make the case for why it's important to be investing in your people. I mean, look at the cost of turnover. Look at what the cost of operating out of looking too much at just strictly black and white numbers and not how the people are driving the business. And also, HR has to make sure that they are aligned with the strategy of the business, the strategy and the goals of the PE, right? Like they have to make sure that they understand that. Otherwise, it is going to look like you're operating in parallel.
So here's my personally my experience with both PE backed and venture backed,
Mhm,
right, companies, and of
mhm.
course I had my own bootstraps. So I was my own bootstrap. I've been with PE and I've been with venture backed.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it keep coming back to KKR, Kirk Kerkorian, right? This is a classic business school case that I think they might still even teach in business school. He was the king of this invest and divest, kind of strategy where he would buy undervalued or underperforming companies,
Mhm,
massive ones like MGM and Chrysler, kind of like PE firms do, in the way that PE firms scout distressed or overlooked assets with growth potential. And they come in there and they say, we have infrastructure that you don't have.
mhm,
We can help you scale in a way that you can't do right now. You guys are profitable, so you don't really need loans. What you need is back office, or what you need is, bridge capital or whatever. And so it's kind of like that. And we used to call that corporate rating back
mhm.
in the day with the KKRs, and then like Nabisco, for example,
Right.
is another example. And it was all around this turnaround playbook. So like
Mhm,
quite literally, it's like, here's my turnaround playbook. First, do this, check, then do that, then do that, then do that. Private equity tactics, very similar in a way that they're like just there to kind of boost value
mhm.
so they can exit. It's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my impression. Private equity is kind of like flipping houses.
So I've had experience with 3 different orgs that were PE backed.
Uh-huh.
And I can say it varies as much from industry as it does from the actual PE group that is involved. I have been
So there's not like
several.
a textbook. That's what I'm
Yeah, I
imagining.
don't think there's a textbook
There's
one.
this
I
textbook that gets passed around, like, okay, go do that.
Right. I mean, I think there is certainly some form of a playbook, right? Like we are looking at EBITDA multiples, we are looking at how we're going to improve the business, we are looking at all of those things. But also, um, I think that there's another type or breed of PE that is out there, and I think that they are seeing that it is possible to be people first. It is possible to have compassion in decision making. It is possible to. Now, the caveat to this is you need to purchase organizations that are profitable and well run
But
and
underperforming
put
and
yourself into that position to kind of start with and then see what is already working for them and then inject the capital into it to help them, 10x what is already working for
that's
them.
what you're supposed to do, and that's what I think is the
That's
selling
what you're
proposition.
supposed to be doing, and
Right.
some don't do that. Some come in with, like, a vice grip of, "Oh, well, we've brought all this capital, and so you should do all the things we
You
tell you to
must.
do."
Right.
Well, but the problem is we were already profitable
And
and well
that you
run,
must is what kills the vibe.
and that's what kills it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So, I mean, Kerkorian was doing PE before it was cool. I
Yeah.
mean, he just didn't have the fund structure. He didn't have the PowerPoint decks. He had limited partners. He was
Mhm.
more of like a solo financer, if you want. But he also did a lot more gut gambling. Today, that kind of model would be similar to like an activist shareholder,
Mm.
kind of thing. So that's how it's different than, and I know intellectually that's how it's different than PE. But I just feel like sometimes, I had a search for a, just as an example of kind of what I'm trying to get to here, for a talent acquisition leader. We can
Okay.
call it VP of TA. That's good enough. I mean, that wasn't the job title, but essentially functionally, right, for a PE company. And I kept sending them, but this is going to sound really bad. It's not intended to. I'm trying to illustrate a point, but I kept sending them people that were really good at what they do.
Mhm.
And they kept saying no to them. And again, I'm not trying to say that they were looking for people who were bad at what they do. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the people that I'm like, I know this person, they've built these things before, I vouch for them, like, you know, I I recommend them, and they weren't getting anywhere. And
Mhm.
I kept asking, what's the feedback? Why? And finally somebody leaked, I guess, whether intentional or not, that they wanted someone who was in the VP of TA role, essentially capable of putting on PowerPoint decks. That was their job. And I was like, well, goddamn, I was not looking for that at
Yeah.
all. I was looking for a person who was good at streamlining execution,
Right.
turnarounds,
Yes.
and they're like, yeah, but they're not that great with PowerPoint. And I'm like, who cares?
Right. Teach them PowerPoint.
Apparently they did. Is that common?
I would say not in my experience, but nothing would surprise me
So
also
what's up with
based on
something
life.
like that? I mean, what is the takeaway from there?
I mean,
Is it like people first or founder first? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Well, and why would they not tell you that up front? Like,
well,
this
because
is
they
what
want a
we're
people
looking
first
for.
culture. That's the lie. That's it.
Yeah.
They want they say we're, people are our number one asset. Meanwhile, the CFO is like, no, they're our number one liability.
Yeah.
And it's like, so they say this,
Mhm.
almost like lip service, but then I see what happens when those words meet the P&L,
Yeah.
and the P&L doesn't have the shape that the PE company backers that the board wants.
Right.
So I guess it comes together to, what is the biggest myth that CEOs believe about what it takes to build a culture where people thrive? What is the biggest myth that CEOs believe in that environment? That's kind of, maybe that's why all of this is mixed up.
I think too many people think that people first means soft, or people first means no
Oh my
accountability.
God.
I
That's
think that
it.
I think that's it. People
Oh
first
my
is
God, you
strategic.
nailed it.
Yeah, people first is strategic. It's not soft. People first is giving people clarity, accountability, appreciation. Like,
Wow.
culture is how decisions get made and how people feel when they leave a meeting. It's not perks, posters, table tents, your barbecues. That's not culture. And I think that people first means addressing conflict and not avoiding it. I think that when you consistently do what you say you're going to do,
Mhm.
then that's when your culture is working. And that's when you have a people first culture, because you're putting the best interest of those people
Yep.
at the forefront. People first is not soft.
But I think that's right. I think you hit it right on the head. That's exactly um I'm sensing, is that it's like, we want to say that, but then we don't want to, have this kind of soft mushy culture
Right.
of, everybody's number one, everybody gets a trophy at the end of the day, and
Right.
like, that's really not what that means.
Well, and it also doesn't mean that you're never going to make a hard decision. We make hard decisions
Business is
every
hard.
day,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It
Right.
doesn't mean that, oh, we're people force, so we're going to give everybody a 25% raise and we're going to, give them
Right.
unlimited PTO, which is a scam, by the way. And it
Yeah. Oh, so much of a scam.
does
So much.
not mean
Oh my
any
God.
of those things. People first just means we're going to be as honest as we can be, as transparent as we can be. We're going to hold people accountable. We're going to give you an environment where you feel like you're doing your best work as often as possible. But everybody has a bad day, but a bad day is not a bad job. And a bad day is not a bad culture and a bad company. And I just, I think that way too many people confuse people first with a lack of accountability and with everything's just, oh, well, people love it there because basically the people,
It's a big party.
rule the company and nobody makes any decisions.
Right.
That's not people first. I don't want to be any part of a culture like that.
So yeah, it's more like, okay, to me, people first is this. People first is the CEO having to make a hard decision and saying, because this is me
Yeah.
and I've done this. So this is when I was my own company's CEO and I had to do this because of COVID.
Right.
People first is when you go you get to that point where you have to go to your people and you have to say, okay, guys, we ran out of money.
Mm-hmm.
And here are the choices. We
Mm-hmm.
can either basically reduce everyone's paycheck by 20% for the next 6 months and try to make it through,
Mm-hmm.
or we can let a few people go, or we can just fold
Yeah.
and cash you out and, basically bargain basement sale, and, give you as much as we can. So we can either like pay you on the way out, or we can reduce your pay and try to make it through,
Right.
or we can say goodbye to a couple of our buddies that and if it's one of those three, let's make the decision together. Let's decide how to sell, when to sell, how much to sell together, so we get some money out of it. Or let's decide, together, who is anybody willing to volunteer
Mm-hmm.
to leave, and we'll take care of them as much as we can.
Right.
Or we all kind of were, if you're all in on it together, let's all take a pay cut temporarily, or so I did that, and the company decided to go deferred comp.
Okay.
And for those people that don't necessarily know what that is, not exactly a very common thing, but deferred comp is where your paycheck is virtual
Mm-hmm.
and you don't get the money until later, but it's kind of put aside, so it becomes part of the company's operating expense, but it doesn't really hit the bank account. And you owe that money,
Mm-hmm.
so you have an agreement to pay that money to them. You definitely will pay it, but it's kind of borrowing from your employees in a way.
Right.
And it's weird, but it will help a company kind of float through some really bad times if everybody's in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you have leaders that say, they got the top 10% of people in the company have the top 90% of compensation. And if they defer their comp, then that can, it's not necessarily every employee down to the minimum wage people,
Mm-hmm.
but they chose that, and we squeaked by. So I have ran my own businesses for enough time that I've been through 3 cycles of recession. And let me tell you, you probably already know this, there was a recession before this, whatever this was,
Yeah.
that was way, way worse.
Mm-hmm.
It was way worse than COVID. And I don't know why people don't talk about that. But during that time is
Not
when I
enough
made
internet
that
back
choice.
then.
They don't talk about it now. It's like nobody remembers who was. I was out doing mortgage inspections for $200 a pop to pay
Mm-hmm.
the bills. I was doing locum tenens in medical, which is hard.
Mm.
But that was like, I had to
Dead
pay
bills
the
pay.
bills. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the decision that the team made, and we squeaked by, and we came back, and we rebuilt. And then another time after COVID,
Mm-hmm.
not after, COVID hit, and we went from like, well, I'm gonna round up a number. We went from, let's just say, 6 zeros in revenue to 5 zeros in
Mm.
revenue, which is like, if you are the CEO of a company, you're like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah.
Basically the bottom just fell out, right?
Yeah.
And that time I went to the team and I said, there's really only two choices this time.
Right.
And one of them is we just kind of call it quits, right?
Mhm.
And the other one is somebody's got to go.
Right.
So the decision was that two of us would leave and let the others run the company.
Mm.
And so my partner and I stopped taking a paycheck, and we survived for about a year. And eventually, we had to make the other decision, which is to
Mhm.
fold. But
Yeah.
again, that to me, that's people first, because it's involving them in the decision. Ultimately, you're the CEO. In my case, I was the CEO and the owner of the company. I mean, I
Mhm.
had, 51% of the equity, and the other 49% of the equity was amongst some of the partners. So I could just unilaterally make a decision, which is not very, people first.
Right.
But that's what I think people first is.
Yep.
It just doesn't translate that way
Yep.
into this, I don't know,
Yeah.
this P&L driven, KPI driven, got to see it on a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint doesn't. You know how often people cheat? I mean, they cheat on these PowerPoints. Like, if you tell people that what we're going to measure is how many hours you work, they
Yeah.
work more hours. They don't get anything else done. They don't get
Right.
more work done. They just work more hours.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
uh, I had a business school mentor that gave us this story of apple pickers in
Mm.
Maine. You know about this?
Maybe.
So there are there's like a harvest season where you either get the apples before they fall to the ground, or if they fall to the ground, you can't make cider out of them.
Mm.
So if they fall, it's too late. So you got to grab them before they fall. And they kind of a lot of them just sort of fall at the same time, and it moves based on the climate. And so there are people who this is their thing is they go and harvest apples from one grove to the other like that, and they can either get paid by the hour
Mm.
or they can get paid by the bushel.
Mm.
Those that get paid by the hour don't usually bring in as many apples.
Mm. Mhm.
Those that get paid by the bushel bring in the most apples.
Yeah.
So you're kind of paying for results. And in some cases, what I see happening is the rules come through because on paper, as you said, it
Mhm.
looks great that we're going to reduce our hourly pay. But what ends up happening is we reduce the amount of apples,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So all that to kind of come around to this other question, you can coach leaders on earning a seat at the table.
Yeah.
But in your experience, what
Mhm.
is not going to work when you're trying to prove your value to the business in HR or in TA? What is not going to work? What gets you laughed out of the table?
Um,
Because we know it's not the PowerPoint chart.
right.
You can walk in there like example I gave you with the perfect PowerPoint chart, and they can still laugh you out. So it's not
Right.
that. It's what is it that what is
I
it that doesn't work? What's the biggest mistake we make?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one
Okay, I'll take
is
more than one. I like
yeah,
that.
I think one is why are we even asking for something that we were allegedly hired to do? Right? I
Oh,
mean, like, if you're in the role, you are at the table. So you should show up, you should speak the language, you should understand what is going on. And I mean, I had a
mm,
boss once that said, if you get invited to a meeting and you don't participate, you don't get invited the next time because your participation, like there was a strategic reason that you were part of that meeting, is we wanted your insight, we wanted your feedback, we wanted to know, more about your perspective in that. But for HR people that are saying, I want to be strategic, one, do you even know what that means for starters?
that's a
Um,
different question, but not what I was asking.
I
I
mean,
don't want to
you
go there. I
hear
don't want to go there.
people, you hear people all the time, right? They're like, I want to be
Oh, they
strategic.
think it's strategy, but it's tactics.
What does that mean? Right?
Yeah, they think
What
it's
does that
strategy,
mean
but
in
it's
your business? Because it
yeah,
doesn't mean the same thing everywhere.
no.
And don't show up to the table and expect somebody else to teach you why you're there. Like, show up to the table, understand the language of the business, understand what's important. Don't bring some initiative that you've thought up that has nothing to do with the alignment of the objectives and the strategy of the business. because that is when you're going to show you're incredibly out of touch and have no idea what's going on in the business.
Okay, so like first of all, back up. Step one: know the strategy and alignment of the business.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with that. Let's assume you got that.
Yeah.
And then, God, I almost fell out of my chair when you said that. I think you nailed it. It's if you've been invited to the meeting,
Yep.
participate.
Participate in the meeting.
Yeah, that's. I think maybe. Do you think maybe people get invited to the meeting and they think maybe they just need to be there for whatever reason, for looks or cover or whatever, and then when they get there, they fall victim to imposter syndrome, and
Yes.
they think, I don't really have anything important to say.
Right.
These people are all over my head. So like you're at the table, you got invited to the table
Right.
because somebody wants your opinion,
Yes.
and you're not expressing your opinion because you
Right.
think it's not worthy.
Or you don't express your opinion or your thought because you've either been doing, like, you know how when you're deep in something and you've been in it for so long that you're too close to the problem and you think, oh, well, everybody thinks that. Oh, well, that's just a common sense observation, or that's a common sense. Of course they've thought about that already, right? Like, this is the senior executive group of the organization. This is the C-suite, or this is the, group of vice presidents, or whatever this executive leadership is. Or even if it's not executive leadership, like, surely they've thought of this already. I have news for you. They have not. So even if you bring it up, though, and it's something that they've already talked about, then maybe we're just readdressing it and making sure that nobody lost sight of that. And then after the meeting, they're going to discuss the meeting and they're going to say, hey, who was that asked that really good question? Because you can tell critical thinking and problem solving are priceless skills. I'll take those over a fancy degree and whatever any day. If you show up in a meeting and you ask good questions, not asking questions for the sake of asking questions, but if you show up, you show that you're paying attention, you show that you understand the business, and you ask good questions, I'm inviting you back.
Oh my God, you just described me. You're totally raining on my parade right now. It's like I have done that exact thing. I have done the exact thing of, well, they already know this.
They already know it.
Why am I going to state the obvious? Well,
right.
How do you? Damn. So how do I? This is real. I'm getting kind of greedy here, but like, teach me how I state the obvious. I'm thinking to myself, they already know this, and so I don't say it. So how do I talk myself into saying it? Is there a way to like start with, everybody might already know this? I don't want to look like an idiot, but.
So I always think like, okay, you make decisions with the information that you have, right? And you can't make a decision with information you don't have. So if my part of this meeting is to provide more information to make sure that we make the best decision, then that's my goal. And so maybe you're in the meeting and you're like, hey, I realize I'm new here and you all have been meeting on this for however amount of time, and I wasn't privy to the prior discussions, but this is kind of what I'm thinking about and want to make sure that this is addressed. And then
even if in the back of your mind, you're thinking they probably already know this.
Right.
And if they probably already know it, then you have an L, because they'll be like, well, yeah, we already thought it. And you're, oh, okay, great. At least I brought it up. Yeah. And if they don't know it, then all of a sudden you have the sharpest idea they've ever seen.
And if they did already think about it, then you're like, oh, good. Then I asked the same questions that you asked. I thought about the same
things. Oh, that's validating. I like that. That's validating.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that. Okay. Wow.
I love it when somebody says, oh, I had that same question and I didn't want to say it. And I'm like, good. We're on the same wavelength then, right? Like,
oh my God, that's funny.
Minds, right?
I gotta tie that back to recruiting just for a second, because this has happened to me this week twice and last week once. So 3 times in 2 weeks has happened to me where I'm leading a search committee, and it's a very different kind of search.
Yeah.
If, for example, one of them is for governor's chair for the state. So we're talking about some stuff where like there's a lot of people involved with recommending people and stuff like that. Anyway, so this happened 3 times where I put someone on the list and I did the rubric and I did all the scoring and grading and built the dossiers and everything, and I put it all in front of the committee, and somebody in the committee says, "Oh, that's that's the peer of this person. That's the other, like, of course I didn't know that,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not exactly visible,
Right.
but they're literally basically saying you found the other person that does this. Obviously,
Yeah.
we can't hire them,
Right.
but and to me, that's like, well, you had the same thought I did. That's really validated. Like to me, it's
Yes.
not, well, I just wasted my time. To me, what that says is, if I found the other person that does this, then
Yep.
I must be on the right track.
I'm on the right track.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really, I like that.
Yeah.
It brings it back to recruiting. And
Mhm.
I don't know why it's happened so often recently. It's not something that usually happens a lot. I think maybe it's because of the scarcity of these, particularly these candidates.
Yeah.
When there's a lot more market, then it's a lot less likely that you're going to find that one person that they already, you know.
Right.
So maybe that's the reason why. But
Yeah.
so leadership development that actually sticks
Yeah.
without sticky notes. Right? Leadership development that actually sticks.
Yeah.
So you've created programs that show up in stay interviews and in bottom line metrics. What makes development efforts fall silently, like the quiet quitter? And how do you make sure that it really changes the behavior and it doesn't just kind of like, hey, we put this thing in place and then slowly just sort of fades away?
So kind of exactly what you said, it's a behavior, and you need to embed it into the daily operations. You need to embed it into
Yeah, but how? That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we have enough time to break it all down, but like, so what is it that we're just not doing that is not allowing it to be embedded? I guess that's a terrible way to ask the question, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why are we
So
missing the mark on that?
I think that the biggest thing is making the old way still available and still accessible.
Oh, okay.
Because if it's easier to do it the old
To
way,
go back.
they're going to do it every time, right? Like if
Well,
you,
that's
so
rough.
for example,
It's a
performance
rough one.
management. Let's say that you've spent lots of dollars and time and resources on putting together this system. It's embedded in your HRIS, and now you can do performance reviews in there. If I can still pull up a PDF, or if I can still pull up a piece of paper that I can print off and do it and just send it in, I'm going to do it every time. Because why would I do this new way if the old way was quicker and easier for me? So
Well, the new way might be, but you don't know it, so you haven't
and
learned it
that's what I
yet.
was
So
going to
right,
say. So on
right.
the flip side, if my daily behavior is that I'm in this system is giving me things that are making my job better and easier as a leader, then doing one more thing in the system, well, that's a system I'm already in. That's a system my people already use. That's a system that is already embedded into our operation of the business, versus now, oh, well, that's messy, and oh, well, I can't see the trend of my people over time. I can't see how I measure up with other people and the other leaders in the organization, over time. If I can't see that because what I'm doing isn't part of the system, then it's going to retrain my behavior.
Okay, so let me translate this because, well, it's expected of me. I think a lot of people appreciate kind of my like cut through the crap
I like it.
approach.
Yeah.
You're basically saying take the training wheels off.
Yeah. And don't make it an option.
Yeah, take the training wheels off. You're saying
It's not an
okay,
option.
we moved from moving sidewalk to bicycle. We're leaving the moving sidewalk there for those of you that prefer to use that. That's not going to work. So
Right.
if you just go like, guys, we have replaced the moving sidewalk. It is no longer available. You have no choice but to use the bicycle. And somebody comes, where's my sidewalk? Sorry, no more sidewalk. I mean, you're literally saying take the sidewalk out from under them.
And we are also providing training and support. We encourage
Okay.
feedback. We want you part of the process. What was it about the old process that you liked so much? What can we do to integrate that into the new process?
Okay, yeah. So that's just good building.
Yes.
Right. So let's assume that you've built something that you've already taken all that feedback into consideration, and you're doing it the right way. But then I think the Achilles heel, what you're saying is, um, you're doing it the right way, but then there's still an escape valve. There's still an alternative. Like,
Right.
well, if you have any hard, and do you remember back in? It wasn't that long ago for me, but it's probably completely alien to most of our listeners here. Do you remember a time when you had to go into the store to fill out an application?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
Yeah.
And they replaced that with an online application,
Right.
and people were like freaking out that candidates weren't going to be able to apply.
Right.
So they allowed the online application to be like, so we had essentially still branches and facilities that were taking paper applications.
Right.
And it became a nightmare because we had to then
Yes.
scan them in and all that stuff.
Right.
Um, it was like we had to just rip that out, and so
Mhm.
we completely removed that.
Right.
And in order to answer the problem, or which really was a perceived problem, we just said, okay, fine, you can have an application in the store, only it's a kiosk on a computer that
There
they
you
have
go.
to fill out.
Sure.
Like, okay, but it's just not going to be paper. Like, you know what? We're not going to send them home to apply. Well, they're not going to apply. They're not going to know how they. What if they don't have a computer at home? Okay, valid, right? Can they go to a library? No. Okay,
Right.
fine, valid. All these things are valid, but still, we're just not. You would not gonna. It cannot be on paper.
Right.
Where we then have to put it in a file and then do Iron Mountain, destruction and all this other stuff. Like, we can't have
Right.
social security numbers and stuff like that sitting around in filing cabinets in the modern age. So we came up with that compromise, but we had to. What you're saying is put in the rails or the safeguards that prevent them from using the old system, but also give them an alternative to the new system that's compliant with the new system. So it's not just take out the training wheels, but maybe also provide some, bike riding lessons.
Yeah, and also it starts at the top. I've been part of organizations where, not naming names, because I love them all, right? But I've been part of organizations where the new process, the new system, whatever, was for everyone else. And maybe the C-suite wasn't even doing performance reviews, right? Okay, let alone using the system. Right. And if you're not showing from the top, this is the way that we operate, this is the way that we're doing this, from the CEO on down, it will not be adopted. Because if they can't look up and say, oh, well, my boss is doing it. Oh, well, my boss's boss is doing it, right? Then it's not important.
It's okay. They don't do it, so we don't have to.
Exactly. I've worked in more than one organization where I didn't get a performance review. And it was just simply because of who I reported to, and they didn't do performance reviews.
No.
And it was like, hey, we've all got to be doing this, right? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. I talk to my people all the time. Make me scream. Yeah.
All right, so let's switch it up a little bit. So you've got a budget, you've got a blank slate, and then you got a PE board breathing down your neck. So the PE firm just dropped you into their latest project.
Okay.
Nothing's in place.
Okay.
You got 90 days to show some impact. What's your holy crap checklist?
I'm meeting with people first.
Okay.
I'm understanding what the culture and subcultures are. Okay. I'm understanding what the biggest pain points are. So are we doing a bunch of hiring? Do we need, an onboarding process put in place first? Have we had people in roles forever and we're looking to do some internal promotions? So maybe we need to be giving some feedback on performance. Like, I need to understand, again, what are the priorities of the business so that I can align my initial initiatives to that to be most effective. And I want to know what has been working that needs to continue, and I want to know what's broken that can make some quick fixes to make a real impact.
You ever hear of that model? I think it might be used in software development. Stop, start, continue.
Yes.
Sounds like
Yes.
that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you deliberately ignore as you're doing this? What are the things that maybe are distracting to others, but that when you're putting this 90-day effort in to show impact, what are you deliberately not going to do?
Anything that is going to be too much structure that won't be flexible and won't be able to scale. Things that
Okay.
are, if things are too rigid, then people will break. If they're too loose, then chaos takes over. So you got to kind of balance that structure
Hmm.
and understanding that we want to build just enough structure in place so that we can be aligned and things can be scalable, but not so much that it's complex, and that now we've focused so much on the structure and maybe these
Mhm.
processes, and it's set in stone, and now if we need to be able to iterate or pivot or whatever, that we can't do it. We always need to be able to remain flexible in order to be scalable.
Right, because that's one of the biggest uh, hurdles in PE backed companies is that they want to scale. They want to,
Yes.
yeah. This is a growth spurt. This is a sprint, maybe.
Right. Right.
And so the company might have been running a marathon.
Do a full, re-release and a redo later, but
That's cool if you say, hey, based on feedback and based on when we
right.
put this in, we didn't have this information.
Right.
So yeah, that makes sense. I get
Yeah.
that. I get that.
Yeah. But if you're like,
So
I'm not doing onboarding, I'm not surveying my people, I'm not making sure that our recruiting process is not a, 90-day black hole where nobody gets any feedback. If you're saying that you're sacrificing all that because you're working on the handbook or because you're doing something else that is not a direct value add to the people in the business, then you've missed the point.
okay, all right. What else are we missing? What else are we missing when we because I just want to help listeners out there that maybe haven't this is their first time in a this kind of environment where they maybe were part of a company that recently got acquired or
Mhm.
by PE or so. What else are we missing? It's an alien environment, I think, for folks. It's
It
not
can be.
very
Yeah.
yeah, it's very different than, like I said, the other models. So what else are we not looking at that we should be paying attention to with regard to HR um, development and talent acquisition once you become PE backed?
Make a good mix of observing and respecting existing culture and process with coming in and trying to change everything. Because you may have done something a certain way in a prior organization and it might not be an applicable transfer into your new environment.
Okay.
Um, and some people are really emotionally attached to some of the things that they're doing. So get an understanding as well for that. Like, don't be the tone deaf HR person that comes in and is like, oh, I know better than you do about the company that you've worked for 25 years, because this new company that also just got to know you in the last 6, 9, 12 months, whatever, they know better than you do about how this should run. Like, no, you should defer to people and have a deference of, you're in your role for a reason. You have skills. You have at least the finger on the pulse of the culture. You have all that historical knowledge of why our customers love us. What's our competitive advantage? Like, why do we win? And understand that. And also understand the people who have influence without authority, because those people need to be your champions when you want to go and make changes. Find out how it's going to go over before you start to try to make suggestions for initiatives. Find out where people are struggling. And if they are not talking to the executive team or they're not talking to their managers, find out why about that as well, and then work to be a presence and a support so that you can build trust. Because if you don't build trust, you can't do anything.
Well, building trust is not. Yeah, it's a challenging proposition
Mhm.
because when you have if you have a good experience and things are shifting, it's a little bit easier. It's a
Right,
lot easier to build trust. But when you
right.
have something that it's that it just part of the reason the PE is coming in is because things weren't working in some areas,
Mhm,
and people are carrying a bit of a grudge. It's
mhm.
a lot harder
Yeah. But if
to
they
do.
were there, they aren't blind to that. So you can say, "Hey,
Yeah,
as you
okay,
know, this area of the business was struggling.
right. We're
I'm
hitting the
sure we
reset
all felt
button.
it.
Okay,
We're gonna have to make some tough decisions." Like, that again goes back to be as transparent as you possibly can. Sometimes you can't be, and that is just like I call it the burden
yeah.
of information. Sometimes you have information that you cannot share, and it's gonna eat you up and keep you up at night, and sometimes that is your role.
If it doesn't eat
But
you up and keep you up at night, you might be a psychophantic narcissist. Just saying.
and I've worked
Yeah.
for some of those
Wow.
too.
Wow.
So, and been married to
Oh
some.
my
So, I
god, you
mean, it's
just
the whole
slipped that
thing.
one in. That's awesome.
The whole thing.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's that's tough because it's in a in a corporation where you have a lot of established processes. They're publicly traded, or um, they
Yeah.
have they're privately owned, but they've been around for a long time, and there's not private equity coming in. It's
Mhm.
changing trajectory has to follow a more rigid path because if you're being audited and you're publicly traded, you can't just all of a sudden like
Mhm.
hit the brakes and make a sharp left turn. But with PE, then
Right.
there is that you are under due ownership, so you kind of can do that.
Mhm.
You can make those sharp turns. So that may be an advantage I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of. Yeah,
Well, and if you've built trust and you say up front, right? We're gonna be
yeah.
making some
Put your
changes, or
seatbelts
we're
on. We're
gonna
making a
be
sharp left
making
turn.
some really right, we're gonna be making some really tough decisions for the business. And I just need you to trust that we have the best interest of the business at heart and we're making the best decisions with the information that we have right now. And I welcome your feedback and I welcome you to share with us, how that impacts you. And I mean, if it results in, a big layoff, know that that decision was not made lightly.
Okay. Wow. I've learned a lot. It's definitely been helpful for some of my, bringing around some of my experiences. Um, I know we're getting
Yeah.
pretty close to wrapping up here, so I'd love to close out with. Well, there's a question I have to ask everybody on the show, but I'd also love to close out with something a little bit different. Most of the time, I ask for a thought that we could take with us over the weekend and kind of introspectively ask ourselves. But since the topic is a little bit off the beaten path for me here, I'd like to ask something a little bit different. Um, what's the one strong opinion that you hold that others might disagree with? The unpopular opinion that you hold
Mm.
fast. I mean, you're not not something that you're like, well, I debate this, but like, what is one thing that you stand your ground, the proverbial hill, right? That others
Yeah.
often disagree with.
Mm. I can hear myself saying, "And this is the hill I'm gonna die
Yeah, I didn't
on."
want to
So
say
I
that, but
know
that's kind
that
of
there's
what. Yeah, that's what I
something.
meant.
I
That's what I
know that
meant.
there
What's that hill?
yeah. Um, I will not be talked down from, and this is again something that you think, oh, everybody knows that. I will not be talked down from the importance of having one-on-ones with your team. The people that say, I talk to my people all the time, I don't need one-on-ones, you do. You need to have regular, scheduled, structured time with anybody that reports to you, even if it's cross-functional, like it's like you're,
Mhm.
whatever level, and you've
A
got
dotted line or
group
yeah.
presidents or business leaders or something. You need to do that because that is where you establish the relationship, and that is where you're going to establish the trust. That meeting is not for work and for meetings and for
It's not performative.
um,
It's not check a
status
box. It's
updates.
there's
Nope,
a
that
reason.
meeting is strictly to build the relationship, and I think that that is how I've been able to build relationships quickly, develop rapport quickly, because I focus on the relationship first and foremost.
Well, that's a big hill. I think I've been guilty myself of I know them really well, don't really need to have weeklies. But then I've also
Mhm.
found that I had to go back and reinstitute them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've been guilty of doing that and then and then undoing it. Um, but I
Yeah.
think that the danger is when you fall as a leader, you fall into the lazy pattern of relationship building for nothing other than just relationship building. And then you have
Mm.
the lies that come with that of, yeah, we're all just one big happy
Mhm.
family. No, we're not.
You can't fire your family. Quit calling your
Yeah,
workforce your
that's what I'm
family.
saying, and
Quit
that's
that.
what happens with these perfunctory, meetings that are like, well, we're gonna have these meetings. We end up talking about how the kids, and it's like, yeah, that's dangerous ground because then you start treating people like family, and you may be really close, maybe a tight team,
Right.
but I'm not a fan of that
Yeah.
personally.
Well, and also respect people's boundaries. I might not know you and trust you enough to talk to you about
Yeah,
that.
that irks
Maybe
me.
I do wanna just talk about work at first because I'm still trying to feel out if I can trust you or not. The worst thing that you wanna do is to violate somebody's boundaries and try to get kinda too personal too soon.
Just
They
too
are
personal,
never gonna
period. I
trust
mean,
you
geez,
because they're not.
like I've been
Yeah,
team
but
meetings where the leader is talking about their fur babies and how they're so important to them, and then other people start pitching in with their fur babies, and they're like, "Yeah, my fur babies are like children," and I'm chatting with other parents, going, "Are you, whiskey tango foxtrot? Are you kidding me?" Like there is a don't talk to me about dogs and cats being like children that are in the emergency room with life-saving surgery. Like it's just not the same. Or
right.
conversely,
It's
when
not the
they're
same.
all
Yeah,
sitting around talking about, their kids, and there's people that have no intention of having kids, and it's just like it's too personal. I don't know if that's really a
right. It
yeah.
can, yeah,
I think so. Don't
it
I like
certainly
what you're
can be.
saying about that. Don't skip on the one-on-ones, but also at the same time, don't make the one-on-ones a chit chat. It's not gonna.
And the number one way to do that is to let the direct report start the meeting.
Oh,
They
okay.
set the tone. You're not asking them personal questions, right? Like let them start and
Then if
let
they
them know
bring
ahead of
personal stuff
time
up, then right,
that they started, right? So if they come in
my
and they're
kid's
like,
in the hospital or whatever,
man, I
right?
had a really rough weekend and whatever,
Then you can
then
match them,
okay, then that's what
right?
we'll talk about and
That's a good
that's
point.
fine. Yeah. And that then you're not like, "So, how many kids do you have?" "Oh, I don't have any children and I had a, whatever
Yeah,
catastrophic
yeah,
event." And
yeah.
then you're like,
Stepped in
"Oh,
that one.
sorry." Yeah,
That's really useful.
yeah,
I think don't skip the one-on-ones and don't make and don't just force yourself to have them and be like idle chatter.
yeah.
So who should be our next guest? Who would you like to see on the show? Take a chance.
Mm,
Doesn't even have to be somebody. You don't even have to necessarily think that they'll accept. That I will go out there and invite them. Who do you think would add
yeah.
value to the conversation, if you will?
So I have a good friend, Kyra Makovich, and she's super busy. And we used to be on like do you remember when it was like the Sherm bloggers, and then we were influencers, and then we were whatever, and then that whole group got defunct? I met her through that, and we've been friends for the last like 12, 13 years ever since. Like, we're true friends that met on Twitter. But she has a phenomenal perspective on people and leadership, and yeah, she's a wonderful
So say it a little bit slower so I can spell it.
Kyra, Kyra Makovich.
Got it. Thanks. I'll reach out. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. This was very, at least for me personally, again, I'm being selfish, but for me personally, I learned a lot and validated some things that I didn't really know I needed validating. All right. Well, folks, everybody, that wraps up our week. Next up, we have Bob Beck coming back. This is he'd be a repeat offender. Actually, he's been on the show a long time ago. We worked together a couple of times, and he's in the tech space. Has a lot to offer with regard to optimizing your recruiting and working in some pretty weird areas where the talent is really hard to approach and find. So it's going to be an interesting show. Hopefully, we'll see you here for that. Until then, thanks again, everybody.